So far, we have been using the terminal in order to interact with our chatbot. But this is not always useful because we want to give the user a better user experience. And using the terminal is not always helpful in terms of the user experience. And of course, you always need to take user experience into account, and you need to consistently improve user experience. So in order to improve user experience, what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to kind of let the user interact with the chatbot in a web page instead of using the terminal. I'm going to be deploying our website, our chatbot on a web application. So how can we do that? Well, I'm going to be doing that using Flask, which is a web framework based on Python. So I'm going to first here import from Flask. I'm going to import Flask. And of course, you need to have already downloaded Flask. And by the way, if you want to learn Flask and create a complete web application using Flask, which is an awesome web framework, I'd highly recommend checking out my course on Flask, where I teach you how you can create a complete web application using Flask. So now that we have imported Flask, we need here to create an object, Flask, and then here I'm going to say double underscores and then name, and then double underscores, and then I'm going to store this in a variable called app. And don't worry about that, this is just housekeeping stuff. We need to create an object from Flask in order to run our application in the browser. So here we need to say at the end of the script, we need to say if and then if the name, and then double underscores is equal to main, double underscores and then main, and then double underscores. Then what we need to do is that we need to use that app.run in order to run our application. And I'm going to also here use the debug parameter in order to display any errors. If we have any errors, we need to display them in order to know what's going on. And of course, you need to set this to false if you go live and publish this application in your website. You need to disable this because you don't want to let customers see problems and error messages. And now that we have Flask object and we have here checked that the name is equal to main, and here we have kind of executed our application, we need to create what's called a route. Because in order to deploy our application on a web page, we need to use a route. What's a route? A route is just a URL. For example, we have Google www.google.com and then / and then search. This is just a URL, and we need to create a URL like this in order to run our application on that URL, so to speak. So I'm gonna here say @app.route, and then this is gonna take the name of or the URL itself. So the URL, I'm just gonna deploy our chatbot on our main page. So I'm just gonna say here /, and then we need here to create a function for each route. There must be a function in order to execute that function once the user goes to this URL. So for example, if this URL is 123 dot just a number dot 989 and then /, once the user goes to this local host or URL, we need to execute this function and do something. So here I'm going to create a function and I'm going to name it main. And this function is going to do nothing, but it's going to return a web page. So I'm going to say here return, and then we need to return a web page. And in order to return a web page, we need to import here the render template. We need to import the render template function, and then we need to use it here, render template. And then this is going to return a web page. So I'm going to return a web page called index.html. But we don't have this index.html yet, so we need to create it here. I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to name it templates. And by the way, it must be named templates. This must be named templates. And then inside this folder, I'm going to create a file called index.html. And this index.html will be returned, as you can see here. It will be returned once the user goes to this URL. So this index.html must have an HTML code. So to create the basic skeleton of that HTML, I'm just going to say here, I'm going to type here exclamation mark and then hit enter. And in Visual Studio Code, this is going to create the basic outlook of our website, and then of our HTML page. And then here just for the sake of testing, I'm just going to say here h1, and then I'm going to say this is the home page. And then finally, I'm just gonna here comment out these lines because we don't want to run our chatbot for now, and we also need to comment this out because we don't want to train our chatbot for now. We just want to return to this page. And then once you have done that and saved everything, just run your application. So I'm gonna just start debugging my file, and I'm gonna start debugging my Python file, which is the index.py, and this is gonna run our script on my local server. So I'm gonna be showing you that shortly. And now, as you can see, it has been deployed. Our application has been deployed on our local server, on my local server here, and specifically on this port 5000. So I need to copy this URL, and then I need to head on over to my browser. And obviously, I'm using Google Chrome, so I'm going to open Google Chrome and paste that link. So as you can see, after I have pasted that link, it's going to return this home page, and now our application works in the browser.